So we know when he ate his last meal, we know how much was digested, we can see how long ago he was alive, how long he had been digesting it, and how long he stopped digesting it, and so on. Anyway, so when you examine the stomach at this point, you can pull out all the organs. This is when you do the forensic toxicological examination, where we test for drugs and sometimes poisons. This is the field of forensic toxicology, where we try to find all kinds of foreign, and usually dangerous matter inside the body. Drugs and poisons, they're usually. Anyway, so we take samples from various fluids. Blood samples, drugs often get to the blood. Stomach contents, we mentioned that. Again, drugs can be in there. Vitreous humor, that's the eyeball fluid. I'm not going to show you a picture of that. It might gross a lot of you out. But anyway, I'm trying to avoid a lot of these pictures. The eyeball fluid, they take in a syringe and they suck out some of the fluid there. They check that for potassium, even though potassium's not a poison, but it can help you find out the time of the death. And again, it's very fluid. Some drugs and poisons actually accumulate in the eye fluid. And the urine, which again, the body wants to get rid of a lot of these poisons. One of the ways it shoves it into the bladder with the rest of the urine. And so we check that, see what kind of drugs there are, or poisons. We should know that the body doesn't distribute everything the same way it does when a person's alive. After death, there's a new movement of chemicals. Usually, it's often decided by what seeps through what else. I mean, you don't have a heart pumping it exactly through all these blood vessels. It doesn't have a definite route. As long as they just seep through veins and arteries, or seep through body linings, and gravity or something drags blood down. So it's a different kind of movement of chemicals in the body. Now, we see this. We see a dead body for forensic autopsy. We always check for drugs. They're so prevalent in today's society, unfortunately, that we assume a likelihood that there's drugs involved, so we check the body for drugs. Poisons we don't usually check, unless there's some reason. Let's say there's a burn mark around the mouth, like a chemical burn around the mouth, or maybe even a dart hole. Who knows? Well, many possibilities. But unless there's a reason, or let's say witnesses claim that he was poisoned. Many reasons to check for poisons, but generally we don't do it without a reason. Okay, there are many possible reasons the person died, or causes of death. And by the way, we're talking about the cause of death here, not the manner of death. There are only 5 manners of death. That's like a legal term in a way. Anyway, we're talking about the causes of death. What caused death? Some examples. We're not going to give every example, but we'll give the major ones. Here we're dealing with a blunt force weapon, like a club, a pipe, a wrench, a baseball bat. Something that it caused enough damage to break all kinds of things, and so the body basically could not live anymore. So the cause of death refers to the medical chain of events leading to the death. In this case, a blunt force weapon. This causes bruises and internal and external injury. Sometimes the shape of the injury, at least on the surface, might show the shape of the weapon. And in certain cases, if the weapon was used strongly enough, you might even be able to match up certain kind of dents or marks on the weapon to the wound. It's not common, but it is certainly possible. And again, that provides some kind of evidence as to who owned this weapon. But anyway, it's not always so easy to get information because when we compare the internal and external bruises, because over time, the things in the body, they morph a little bit, so you can't always match them. But again, you can usually get decent information from the marks on the body, from the bruises on the body, internal and external. Okay, there's blunt force. There's also sharp force. These are the knives and the swords and whatever, spears, whatever sharp object is used to cut and stab into the body and kill. Usually, death for this we're dealing with a lot of blood. There's a difference in a cut and a stab. A cut is where the surface length is longer than the depth, which makes sense. You're slashing across the body, and the stab is when you stab into the body. So it is again. So there is a difference. And the stab is this is the way it's defined. The depth is longer than the surface length because it goes deeper in. Okay, as mentioned, the crime scene for this is a lot of blood, and we actually talked about the blood spatter analysis, which can give a little more information. So it's not just the dead body; we can get it from the blood on it. In these cases, it's not like instant death, or at least not always. So very often, the person fights back. So the forensic pathologist, the one who's doing the autopsy, should be looking for injuries to the forearms or legs. They might have kicked. They might have tried to block it with their arms. And because this, again, tells us a little bit more about the crime. Was he fighting back? Were they unconscious and unable to fight back? This is important. Like, for example, if we know they were fighting back, maybe there's a chance that the perpetrator has DNA on them from the victim. Again, all things we should take a note of, and which can be important for finding the criminal and proving that the criminal did the crime. So that deals with a lot of violent death, but less violent. Still death, still murder. But another cause of that is asphyxiation. That's basically death by oxygen lack. Now, we're going to go to the less usual one. Usually think of death by oxygen lack as when you close off, you stop them from breathing, you strangle a person. That is very often what happens, mostly what happens. But we're going to start with dying by smoke inhalation, usually in a fire. It's called carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, the way your lungs work is you breathe in air, which contains oxygen. The oxygen sticks to hemoglobin. And it gets pulled in throughout the body and it goes through your bloodstream and so every cell that you need gets this oxygen. However, if there's carbon monoxide in the air, and there is carbon monoxide in the air when there's a fire. So if there's carbon monoxide in the air, if it's breathed in, the carbon monoxide will stick to the hemoglobin more than the oxygen. So if a person's dead in a fire, and because of the fire, he will